Power on.
Welcome, Section 31 Agent. It's time for Sovryn Trek. And here's your host, Brian Sovryn.
Oh, Dr. Brian Sovryn is here, and it is time for your latest episode of Sovryn Trek, episode 25. Woo, can you get enough of that? This episode is, I'm going to be doing this a little bit differently. Rob and I, who often discuss, all year we've been discussing season 2 of Star Trek Discovery together. And we just had the most recent episode come out just a couple weeks ago, episode 24 of Sovryn Trek, and here's episode 25. And instead of getting into a lot of news and everything, I'm going to let the fallout kind of happen from this. And because there won't be any new Star Trek shows, I mean, eventually we're going to get new short treks. Because we're not getting any of that, I'm going to save a lot of the news and a lot of the reviews that I have for comic books, etc., for May of 2019 for episode 26 of Sovryn Trek. So this episode, because Rob and I covered just so much of where Discovery could go, where Star Trek could go, I want to leave this as is and just cut right into him and I reviewing the final 2 episodes of season 2 of Star Trek Discovery, and then talking about what Alex Kurtzman has said for season 3, the potential for a Pike show, which everybody seems to want, along with some other things of where, potential shows and potential directions that all of this can go. And it's so white hot. It's so rock solid. I just want to let it stand as is. I'm going to let the music ride out at the end of the episode. Usually I come back after the segment with me and Rob, but I'm just going to let this one ride right out, and we're going to get right into it. And the only thing I'm going to add in here at the beginning is something that I have said in previous episodes of Sovryn Trek, is that honestly, the direction, you're not going to hear me be a whole lot of positive on a lot of things as far as how Star Trek's doing right now in this episode. Okay, just, to know what's coming, that's what's coming. But I think that because CBS just doesn't seem to, they're just playing all over the place with, what time things are taking place in, what universe things are taking place in. It is the perfect time. Okay. It is the perfect time for Star Trek fans, in my opinion, really to take over this franchise, much like Star Trek Continues did. And you don't have to do it as video. You could do it as like novelizations. You could do it as audio theater, which I still plan on doing audio theater for Star Trek. Just getting everything, kind of reorged right now for 2019. But this is the time for Star Trek fans, really, I think, to commandeer Star Trek and make it their own, because who knows what the hell CBS is doing. Okay, now CBS can still do their own thing and people can enjoy that and have a great time with it. Awesome, dynamite. Let's do that. You'll hear Rob make a great point towards the end. That's what I'm saying. This is such a great conversation. So many great points brought up, especially by Rob. You'll hear Rob say, that right now, because there's a hiatus in Star Wars movies, it's the right time for CBS to get their ass in gear with Star Trek. Bottom line being, it's the right time for anyone who can take the bull by the horns, who can take the reins to get Star Trek into gear. And when you hear this conversation between Robin and I think you'll find out why. So anyway, that's it. Your next episode will come out in May, of course. And you make sure you listen into this month's April 2019's TIE Fighter Renegades. It's going to be a hell of an episode. All kinds of great stuff happening on Zomia ONE, and of course with Sovryn Trek as always. So anyway, we'll cut right to it, and I will see all of you on the other side. Get ready for just a dynamite review and a dynamite overview of Star Trek as it stands today. Here we go.
Beyond the moon
Fighters, wave after wave after wave.
lies a lone outpost in space.
Potentially dangerous alien technology was smuggled aboard this station.
Beyond the stars
Blood calls out for blood.
lies a dream for universal peace.
One night you'll wake up and find our teeth at your throat.
Beyond imagination
Who would do this? Why?
lies Babylon 5, the series.
Babylon 5 is available for download on your favorite torrent site. See it now to experience the greatest show in television history. Babylon 5.
The Man of Tomorrow is here ready to talk up some Star Trek Discovery. We have the season finale, two-parter season finale of season 2 of Star Trek Discovery. But there's no way that I am going to talk about this shit show I'm sorry. There's no way I'm going to talk about Discovery without my man, without Robin Freebeard here to join me for it. And we are going to break these 2 episodes down. Robin, welcome once again to Sovryn Trek.
Thank you for having me on board. And as Data would say, oh, shh.
Yeah, right. Classic Generations quote right there. Wow. So we ended up with we just did Sovryn Trek a couple weeks ago, and we covered all the episodes up until this point, which is the 2-part season finale of season 2, which is called Such Sweet Sorrow, obviously part 1 and 2. And this is the culmination, or supposed to be the culmination, of the storylines put forth throughout season 2. Again, it was a 14-episode season overall, and I think we will get into a bit of like an overview of season 2 as well, because I think that's an important thing to discuss as well. But also not just a culmination of all that, but we knew Alex Kurtzman, who of course he's the Gene Roddenberry these days of Star Trek in a way, at least in role, and he had claimed that this season finale would answer all the questions, would be a game changer, would just shift everything, and nobody's going to be able to expect it, and nobody sees it coming. And so we'll certainly break down whether or not that ended up being true. I mean, because that's a lot of hype to lay out. But yeah, so well, yeah. I mean, the game change? Sure.
Or choice of words in hindsight.
Yeah. Especially the idea that nobody saw this stuff coming.
Right, because they pretty much telegraphed the whole thing in the first episode.
Right. Yeah. I mean, oh boy. Yeah, let's just start talking about it. So,
sure.
Because here's the thing, here's the reality. I could actually describe what happens in these 2 episodes inside of about 2 minutes. Because there's very little that actually, I mean, there's a lot of pretty things that occur, but as far as actual events that occur, there's very few. There's really not a lot of story here. So we can just start talking it up. But basically, I will say quickly that we end up with, okay, how do we resolve what's going on with Control? How do we stop Leland's little Section 31 fleet? Is Burnham going to set off the signals? She's planning to take Discovery off into the future. And where does Enterprise fit in with all this? And there you go. So, and basically that is what happens. And of course, spoiler alerts, ahoy! We do get Control neutralized. Discovery and Burnham in her Red Angel suit do end up going through a wormhole. We will talk about, we have confirmation of where they ended up, and we know we're getting a season 3, so we will break into that. But man, no, I saw all of this coming. I think everybody saw all of this stuff coming. I mean, I think the only thing, and we talked about this last time on Sovryn Trek, Robin, was a lot of people were expecting that Section 31 would somehow be a Borg situation. Right. Like a Borg origin story of some kind. It does not appear that is going to happen. Alex Kurtzman has come out and officially said that Control is neutralized, and that basically they did end up at the end of this. They ended up 900. They're in the 33rd century. Bottom line, that's where Discovery is going to be in season 3, and they will find worse things apparently than Control when they get there. That's what Alex Kurtzman has officially said. So the Borg theory, which we talked about briefly last time, doesn't appear to be the deal. What do you think? I mean, do you still think there's a chance of this Borg origin story happening?
No, not at all. I mean, and I don't remember if I said this last time we talked, but I think I even speculated that it might be a red herring.
Sure, right, just to throw people.
So yeah, and that totally seems to be it was. I mean, I have no doubts that they were trying to hint that and maybe throw people off, because I mean, the way they represented they showed those nanobots and stuff. Yeah, they looked like Borg, nanoprobes. So I like here again. I mean, smart move, but to try to keep people off balance. But yeah, turned out to be totally fake.
Yeah, I read some of the reviews from some of the more trusted sites out there, or at least that I trusted a little bit more, and pretty much everybody had the same opinion. Just that there was a sigh of relief that they didn't go with any kind of Borg origin story, because
I mean, the Borg origin story as it is already kind of a little messy.
Right. Oh yeah. I mean, and yeah, just it's better, like we said last time, it's better to just leave it alone. It keeps it terrifying, and just not worry about it, and just leave it be and let the Borg. I was going to say let bygones be bygones, but maybe we can say let Borgons be Borgons or something. I don't know. But anyway, yeah. So the Borg thing did not end up happening. But I mean, were you predicting that basically they were going to end up, in say the 33rd century or something like that?
Yeah.
And what was? Go ahead.
I mean, the biggest clue to that, of course, was the Calypso short that we got before the season even started.
Right,
so
with the character of Kraft.
We knew that the ship would end up in the future at some point, and we talked very early on about how is that going to happen. Well, now we know. The question that leaves is what happened to the crew, and of course, I'm sure we'll get that story next season.
Yeah. I agree that I think we knew it was going to end up into the far future for the same reason that we did have that episode with Kraft. Somehow Discovery had to be there, and that's that's exactly how it happened. It also, I mean, it does explain that how did Discovery or I think it can explain how did Discovery end up becoming an AI? Have a conscious, seemingly conscious AI that would appear to be able to love. And that would be an evolution, I would assume, of the sphere data that it collected and that it's been protecting this entire time, and the whole reason that it ended up in the future anyway.
Yeah,
so,
my speculation would be for next season is that, we're going to see the sphere data continue to sort of integrate itself with the ship, and the ship itself is going to be a character that develops throughout the season.
Yeah. Which that could be pretty cool. Discovery as a character itself, almost like the Star Trek version of Kit, like Knight Rider, right?
Right.
And I'd be all right with that. In fact, we could even have. You know what? I just thought about this, and it's brilliant. They should really have it where Discovery is saying something like "Be careful, Michael," and just like Michael Knight from Knight Rider, and that'd be. But it's Michael Burnham in this case. If they did some choice Kit quotes, I would be all on board for that.
That makes a lot of sense too, because I mean, we kind of got the impression that Pike left command of the Discovery to Saru, but they didn't explicitly say that. But even if that is the fact, he's still a fairly new and untested captain. So he could use a little help.
Yeah. Agreed. So season 3 is going to be interesting. Again, we have some things confirmed from Alex Kurtzman, basically where it is that there are going to be enemies worse than Control, and that's about what we know. And then you can base anything else off of the episode, the short track, that being Calypso, which you mentioned, Rob. But I want to ask you, how did you feel overall, this two-parter? Did you feel good after seeing it, or did you feel like, what the fuck was that? I mean, give me a little bit of an abstract overview.
I didn't have really a lot of highs or lows during these two episodes. I just sort of I enjoyed it while I was watching it. Afterwards, I'm kind of go overing it and recognizing, obviously there's some problems with it. So, I didn't hate it, but I don't love it either. So, I mean, and that kind of, when we were talking last time, I was kind of being swayed more towards, your argument of the season 2 overall, and I'm still kind of, like the logical part of my brain is very much, in agreement with you on that. But there is sort of the emotional element, and the like I said before, the acting in this season's been really good, and I think the acting in this episode was pretty good over with a couple of things that didn't quite hit, but yeah, overall, like I said, it's kind of like a high meh.
Yeah, I'm meh. I like that. Yeah, I don't. I mean, if I turn my brain off, like there's tremendous action.
Right.
You get great starfighter battles. There's some really cool looking things. Like there's other Section 31 ships other than the ones that we've seen throughout season 2. In fact, it was kind of cool. There's ones that look like the black ship from Star Trek Into Darkness, which was a Section 31 ship, the USS Vengeance, and like where it has like kind of the what they called like the Swiss Army knife or the bottle opener saucer section, which I thought, or it's not exactly a saucer, but anyway, I thought that was slick. There were some really cool things with that, and I could enjoy it at that level. But then as soon as just a remote amount of thinking gets involved, things fall apart very fast with these 2 episodes, and it colors the entire season. Go ahead.
The thing I was just thinking afterwards too is kind of like the whole battle sequence and everything. I kind of felt like they were trying to do Deep Space Nine, the Dominion War sort of stuff. But
sure, Way of the Warrior kind of
Deep Space Nine did it better.
Right.
Yeah, and
without CGI.
Oddly enough, too, is like did you think some of those Section 31 ships kind of looked like Dominion ships too? Like the ones with the 4 nacelles on the side.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of had a look. They also looked like the Prometheus that would come later, like in Voyager. Yeah, there was a lot of design cues, which is okay. I mean, it's kind of okay, but yeah, I agree with you. It did look like they were trying to appeal to like these big, I mean, some of Star Trek's biggest battles were really on Deep Space Nine.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, totally, like unequivocally.
Yeah. I mean, I could think
maybe Into Darkness, or not Star Trek Beyond.
Right,
which had shades of that too, with all of the drones and whatnot flying around, and no, I definitely think, but it's amazing to me because I don't know how much CGI DS9 was using, but like I think of episodes like The Die Is Cast, where you had the Cardassian and Romulan fleets taking on the Dominion, and you had the Defiant there and everything, and those battles were way more intense than what I was watching here, or at least more, or I don't know, they were better done for some reason. And the dialogue was even better, which that's a whole other conversation. That's kind of basically what I was saying is Deep Space Nine has done all this and they did it better.
Yeah.
And I don't think they were using CGI back then. In fact, I don't think CGI started getting really heavily used in Star Trek until the later seasons of Voyager.
Yeah, that was my impression as well. That's when CGI came into the picture. So anyway, I mean, let's talk a bit about the battles. But basically, this is where, we're just going to start talking about it where I think things really fell apart with this episode. And then if there's anything like really good things, I think we can get into that. But the battle sequences, there are just some. So here's the thing. I think this show has the writing has been rough. The science has been worse.
Yeah.
And there's rampant contradictions within the show. I mean, just rampant contradictions still. And in fact, I'm still disappointed that we didn't get some of the contradictions I mentioned in the last episode of Sovryn Trek, that we didn't get any real satisfaction as far as answers of what happened with her mother, with Michael Burnham's mother. But man, like in the battle sequences, so suddenly a bunch of these like ships, like drone ships, start flying off of the Section 31 ships. And somehow they will, like the Enterprise does this really cool move where Pike puts the Enterprise in between the Section 31 fleet and Discovery because he knows those drones are coming. And all those drones just ram into the Enterprise, but they ram into the shields of it, and the shields kind of, knock them all out, right? But then somehow there's this torpedo, which we knew was coming because Michael Burnham had a vision of it. And this torpedo can get through, through Enterprise's shields, no problem. And that made no sense to me, that like actual drone ships can't get through Enterprise's shields, but like a torpedo can. And I don't, there's so many little things of this. And then that torpedo, here's the other thing that like really got me. They're scared to death of this torpedo that hasn't exploded, but it lodges itself into the saucer section of the Enterprise, right? It's about to explode, and so they're trying to disarm it. This ends up in the death of Admiral Cornwell, which whatever, that's fine. And Pike is like trying to figure out something to fix it or whatever to keep it from exploding. And he just says, he's like, well, we can manually, or Admiral Cornwell says we can manually close this blast door. You can get on the other side of it, and I'm just going to let it go. And Pike just lets it happen. Pike just stands on the other side of this blast door, and this fucking photon torpedo, it's a huge photon torpedo. It's like bigger than, or it's like maybe a 10th or 12th of the size of the saucer section of the Enterprise. Explodes in his face, but he's behind the blast door, so he's fine. And right. Are you going to make the entire Enterprise out of those blast doors? Because those things are amazing.
Not just the blast door, but like that little window that was in the blast door. Whatever they made that window out of, use the whole ship to make right. out of that.
Right? What the fuck? I mean, and we're talking about a Section 31 torpedo, which you got to imagine those are more powerful than what Starfleet regularly deals with.
Well, I mean, you saw the big chunk of the ship missing at the end of the episode.
Yeah, which made it look like the NX-01, by the way.
Right,
yeah. I mean, there's this huge chunk, and that blast door stopped that? I'm like, come on. Yeah. I mean, it was too unbelievable. I mean, look, the transporter as a technology alone, can turn off your scientific mind, because that raises so many scientific problems, ethical problems, and so on. Okay. And so, we gave concessions with like the spore drive and all this. This was, I mean, it's not going to make me stop watching Star Trek, but I'm just like, this was too much. I'm like, what? Are you kidding me? This doesn't even make sense.
I mean, even watching it and watching Anson's mouth performance in that scene, I can almost even like see like him thinking personally, like, I'm not even buying this, like it's like, I can't act this believably, so I'm just going to stand here.
Right. Yeah. He's like, oh, just let it go. If I'm lucky, the torpedo will take me too, because this is ridiculous. It was that blew my mind when that happened. And
the whole, like, and there was just the whole beautiful, almost fourth wall breaking comment about his plot armor.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Oh, man, like there's so much to say about this, and because there's so much that I think really went wrong. Okay, while we're stuck on the battle sequence, it was nice to see the D7s, which I do want to make a correction. When L'Rell appeared through the Valley of Shadows or whatever episode it was that she came back in originally, she did arrive in a D7, and you kind of saw it from the outside of Discovery. Where I said, as to where, we were like, where are the D7s? So I just want to remember
that. Yeah.
No, so, right. It was a split second, but I just want to make that correction in case somebody like emails and says, oh, we saw the D7 here.
Anyway, we didn't even get to see the D7s for very long in this episode.
No, I know. And why? Like, bring them in. They're the star of the show.
Yeah. I mean, they just kind of like, they had the one scene where they kind of worked in and started firing a barrage of torpedoes and phasers, and that was it.
Yeah,
like the big ship that stole the show was the Klingon cleaver ship when it first arrived.
Yeah.
They should have just immediately cut that cleaver ship out, because we've seen it before, for one.
Right.
And two, should just brought in the D7s, like a huge fleet of them coming in. That would have been cool. Exactly.
And I that's exactly my thought. And like, it didn't even make sense. Like, why delay them? Like that.
Yeah.
Again, it was more that, in my opinion, just shitty writing. The only thing I could, an overall point here, real quick, is that there were, in these two episodes, there were so many, it felt like there were so many stalls, like, and I don't get it, but there are scenes that went too long. There are things that didn't have to be shown, and it felt like they were almost filling in time, which I can't believe was happening, because there's so much story to tell. There was no reason to have to fill in time with long goodbyes. Some parts of the battle sequence, like waiting for the D7s to show up. The only reason, go ahead.
Well, I mean, the long goodbyes thing, I mean, that's just been a theme that's been running through this whole show where there's a lot of appeals to emotion. And I get it. And some of it works and a lot of it doesn't. But that's definitely something that's been happening throughout the last 2 seasons.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, though, is that in Sweet Sorrow Part 1, they did like 5 of them. Like, there were so many. And,
I know.
And like, I hear you, and I agree that that's why they're doing it. And like you said, you brilliantly said, and I've seen other commentators say it now too. I don't know if they heard us, but that they know their writing's not on point. They know the show's a bit of a mess, and so they're totally riding the greatness of the actors. Like Anson Mount, and they're going for their performances.
For the actors to get those performances, and
precisely. And I can really see that that's going on. I mean, and I understand it. But like that was just like doing like 5 of them in that one episode didn't make any damn sense. As to where there's plenty of cool things they could have done, plenty of conversations. I mean, it's like we finally got moments where the show could breathe a little bit with the characters, where it slowed down, because Part 2, it sure as fuck didn't slow down at all.
No.
But they could have been better moments where we were slowed down.
Although I did enjoy you remember last time we talked, I said, we needed to bring some more levity to the show. And we did get that one moment where Georgiou floats the idea of, blowing up a star, and everybody goes, that's a bad idea. And she says, I didn't think there were any bad ideas. And everybody goes, no, that's a bad idea.
Yeah, no, that's bad. Not happening. Yeah, that was classic. Georgiou's awesome. I mean, her and Pike, in my opinion, are really carrying this show in a big way. So yeah, there had been a little more levity. There's some weird levity though in this, especially in Part 2, where the character of Commander Nan, who is it Benzite, whatever. She's the one with the breathing apparatus on that came over with Pike from the Enterprise. She, like, what the fuck was the line where Georgiou is like, you want to help me take out Leland or something? And she just goes, yum, yum.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then like she makes, I don't know, it was almost like they were going in there with whips and chains or something. It was going to get all BDSM. I mean, like, that's the way she was talking. And she's even like winking when they finally get into the ready room. And she's like, oh, there's so many ways. And I'm like, wait a minute, like, this Commander Nan has been really straight-laced, straight-faced this whole time. And now suddenly she's kinky. Again, horrible writing. I don't understand what they were doing there.
No, I don't think they knew what they were doing with the character. Or knew what to do with the character.
Right. That was so weird. Now, getting back to the battle in the D7s, the only reason I can think that the D7s were held off was to give an opportunity for another, in my opinion, a what the fuck moment, which is when the Kelpians come in flying Baul ships. Yeah. And like Saru's sister's there. And I'm like,
they don't explain at all.
No. But they're just there. And she's like, oh, we're going to fight for you, brother. I'm like, wait a minute, you were just fishing.
Right.
In some river. And then suddenly you're flying this badass starfighter going after Section 31. Wait, what? What did you think about that? Give me some breakdown.
It was weird. It was unnecessary. It just, it made the battle was already too busy to begin with.
Right.
And it just made it even more confusing.
Yep.
And that's something else I have to say about the battle too, is like all these shuttles and pods that are just streaming out of these 2 ships. No, I'm sorry, they can't hold that much.
That's exactly what I said. That's when I was watching it. I was like, wait a minute, I'm like, how many shuttles can the Enterprise hold? I thought it maybe had 3 or 4.
Not swarms. No.
And where did they get all these phasers to put on these worker bees and everything?
Were each and every one of those piloted by a crew member? How many fucking people died during that episode?
I know, because it looks like there's almost like hundreds of shuttles, or at least 10 of shuttles. Yeah. And at its height, a Constitution class would have maybe 400 people. In fact, I know during the events of the Cage, it only had over 200. You lost half the crew. Like,
if not the entire crew. I mean, shit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
none of that made any sense.
Yeah.
Like, and that's the thing.
I mean,
go ahead.
at the very least, that like the Discovery shuttle bay is huge, and it does kind of look like
True.
an aircraft carrier. But
True.
at no point do we see that shuttle bay packed full of shuttles and pods and worker bees. We see like maybe a dozen,
right,
at any given time.
Right,
not
but it's
200.
Yeah, exactly. But it seemed pretty clear in part one that it was Enterprise that really had most of those, because number one says that she took the liberty of getting them all refitted and everything.
Right.
Which is damned convenient. A nice convenient one-liner there. Oh, man, that does make me want to ask this question. No, I don't. I want to stick on the bad stuff because there's some things that actually weren't too horrible, but I will get on those when we're on those. The battle sequence really didn't make a whole ton of sense. I didn't think there was any need whatsoever to show Burnham setting off the signals. You could have just said that, and you could have spent time doing other things.
What did you think of the whole it was the way they represented the wormhole, and that they kind of like they were trying. It seemed to me like they were trying to like represent fourth dimensional space by making three-dimensional space two-dimensional, because you would see the wormhole open and then like it would shift, like the scene would shift and
right.
at an angle, and three-dimensional space literally looked two-dimensional, like a glass pane.
Yeah. I felt like it looked like they were trying to copy 2001,
right?
Like when David Bowman goes through the Stargate,
or even the motion picture.
Yeah. There were very clear, and I've said this since Discovery began. I said they are taking a million cues from Star Trek: The Motion Picture, and when in Star Trek: The Motion Picture, when they go through the wormhole, that's the exact effect that happens that we saw on Discovery with the rest of the crew, where like it's like part of them is extending,
right?
Like but light beams are extending from them.
Yeah, they also did that in Star Trek 4 too, didn't they? When they were doing the time travel.
Yeah, they might have, like with the Bird of Prey itself.
Yeah,
I'd have to think about that. I don't know how much you saw it on the ship itself, but yeah. But again, just you can even look around like on the Enterprise or parts of Discovery, the way the design language of the interior of the ship, and it looks exactly like Star Trek: The Motion Picture. So they've been borrowing from that for a good long while, which I say good because I love that movie.
Right.
And it was nice to have that familiarity of look of what going through wormholes kind of like. I wouldn't have minded if they just copied the exact effect from Star Trek: The Motion Picture of what it's like to be in a wormhole. But with like that orange kind of twisty DNA look to it, but they didn't. So whatever. But I thought it was fine. It just wasn't like really exciting either, and it just felt like a pointless sequence.
To me, it was really weird that effect, that 2D effect they did there. I didn't like it personally.
No, I agree. I agree completely on that. I thought it was a bold move to not show where Discovery ended up, even though Kurtzman comes out and tells everybody, basically. But I thought that that worked. That there wasn't that they left that kind of open. This leads to another major problem with the episode, which was. So after the fact, everybody who stayed behind in the 22nd century or 23rd century is getting they're getting run through the ringer by Starfleet Command, it appears. And you have number one is getting grilled, Pike is getting grilled, Spock is getting grilled. And all three of them are basically saying, "Oh, we saw the Discovery explode. It's gone, during this battle." And then we get a very, very convenient line from Spock, of all people, which I actually think it should have came from Pike. But we get a convenient line from Spock where he says, I suggest that that anybody that has knowledge or was at this battle or saw what happened with the Discovery, they should never speak of it. And if they do, it's treason, which basically means like they get offed, I guess.
Right. Sworn to secrecy.
Right. And to say and the spore drive. So this was their way of explaining with this one line from Spock. This was their way of explaining how, why you don't know about spore drive technology and why you never heard about Burnham, why you never heard about Discovery, in the future, say in the original series or Star Trek The Next Generation, or why Spock never even brought it up, because even Michael Burnham becomes a top secret subject.
Right.
It felt damned convenient. Like,
Yeah,
wait,
no, that's the
go ahead.
perfect way to put it. I mean, it's convenient. In fact, you and I were talking before the show, and this is exactly the moment that I felt that this story feels very much like something that was come up by writers who painted themselves into a corner.
Right.
And that's exactly what this moment is. It's like, well, we got to come up with some reason to tie everything up. So, like I said, we have this convenient explanation that, everybody's been sworn to secrecy, and this is why we don't hear about this stuff anymore. And one of the things that it's not like Star Trek hasn't done this before too, but we assume that spore technology is never used again, although we know it worked. Kind of like how in Star Trek 3 you had transwarp drive, and it's never used again because Scotty sabotaged it.
Yeah.
That doesn't really make much sense, does it?
Yeah, well, that gets into, especially with those warp speeds, that gets into a big conversation where people say that like warp 9 during the original series is vastly different from warp 9 in the Next Generation.
Right. Yeah, which is true.
Yeah, basically they would say that's because they implemented transwarp drive eventually.
But
go ahead.
But then you get into like Voyager, and it's all about transwarp technology that they're getting from the Borg, and they were like, we never got this to work, and now the Borg have figured it out, and we're gonna steal it from them. So that really doesn't fly with me. Is like, yes, they changed somehow. Warp technology changed between the original series and Next Generation, but I don't buy that it was transwarp technology.
Sure. And yeah, I agree with what you're saying, and it's a great point to bring up. I also feel that Spock himself, and this is part of the reason, I think Pike should have said it because he's the commanding officer available, should have been the one to suggest to Starfleet, nobody talks about this. Okay. But Spock knowing about it, and in fact, it really colors poorly, in my opinion, having Spock on the show at all, was the fact that Spock has been with Kirk, or even during the Next Generation, say when they're encountering the Borg or something. If he has knowledge, and he was in engineering, stud in spore engineering, because apparently there's 2 engineering rooms aboard the Discovery. He's been there studying the spore drive. He knows how this shit works.
Right.
And at no point when the galaxy was in the worst possible trouble, the Doomsday Machine, go down the fucking list of all the things that the Enterprise ever encountered, be it Enterprise, 1701, A, B, C, D, E, whatever. He never bothered to say, well, hey, this is bad enough. I know about spore technology, and this is going to change everything.
Right.
Go ahead.
Only that, I mean, Discovery's sister ship, that wasn't destroyed, was it? The crew was killed.
Oh no, they blew it up. They did blow it up.
Okay, I couldn't remember. But I mean, it's kind of like here again. It's not like all the engineers who created, the spore technology, the drive, and all this stuff that they're all dead, or all their notes and their research is just totally gone. I mean, even if Spock wasn't there to figure out how it all works, somebody could go back and look into it and figure out how that technology worked.
Yeah. Now, I mean, I had a thought that what they really should have done is somehow tied it into that, and this doesn't fit in with why Discovery had to end up in the future or something, but I would have tied it in with the Omega particle somehow, and that was discussed in Star Trek Voyager, to where it maybe generated Omega particles or the Omega molecule, whatever, and then okay, we can't use this anymore. That. There's so many other ways they could have explained why there's not spore technology anymore.
They did write themselves an out, because we found out that when they went into this mycelial network, they got pulled in there, that Discovery's spore drive was actually damaging to the mycelial network. And I thought that was going to be the explanation that they used, that they didn't use it anymore in the future. But they kind of dropped us on it. They they put that explanation in, and they completely dropped it. It was never mentioned again. And they're, throughout the season, the continuing season, they still continue to use the spore drive in like dire circumstances.
Right. Which reminds me of season 6, I think it was, of The Next Generation, when you found out that traditional warp drive created subspace pockets where and basically Starfleet put out a moratorium that said you can only go warp 6 if you really need to, and unless there's an emergency, you can go warp 9. And it reminded me of that, but that rule got thrown out. And the writing team, like Brandon Braga, go ahead.
They did bring that up later in Voyager, because I remember like at some point, like I don't remember if it was an alternate timeline, but they mentioned encountering a species where like they didn't allow warp travel in their space because it was damaging.
Yeah. I mean, and there were a couple episodes of Next Gen where they brought it up again, but the writing team even came out. Brandon Braga and all them came out and said, no, we couldn't deal with that. Like we tossed that out,
Yeah.
And endlessly in Deep Space Nine, you'd have ships going warp 9. I mean, it just, yeah. So that's not new for Star Trek, I guess, to kind of ignore that. But there are so many, the answers we were given in this episode were not, in my opinion, for a lot of the questions that fans had, were not satisfactory. And they have a million plot holes, and like it's so easy to just poke holes in this shit. I walked away very annoyed with a lot of that.
Yeah.
As far as explanations go. I mean, do you have any?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, like I agree with you 100%, but I just didn't really let it get to me because I've come to expect it. My expectations were already low to begin with. I'm just sort of like, okay, this is the way these people are rolling. So, like I might as well enjoy the ride while I'm along for it and not try to get too hung up on these things. But no, I entirely agree. They shit the bed when it comes to the plot.
Yeah. How about, why don't we shift a little bit? Like, let's talk about some positives. Let's get in some positives on this. Then I want to get into a bit more of an overview. And anything you want to cut in with at any time, Rob, just cut in, and say
number one. I'm so glad
one.
we got more number one in this episode.
I agree. Yes, she was dynamite. Yeah, I thought. I mean, she just great look, great presentation. Rebecca Romaine is amazing, and we're going to talk about this a little later. But there are a lot of cries for a Pike show, and they want her back, and they want Anson Mount back, and I don't blame them. So, in fact, that's another. Oh, all right. So here we go. Before we get into like overall positive. So number one is a positive. I agree with you. She was fantastic. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about where we saw number one a lot, and that was on the bridge of the Enterprise. And that is question one. What did you think of the bridge of the Enterprise?
I liked it. I thought it was cool. Yeah.
I agree. I thought it looked good. For a rehash, they did it.
Right. And they better hold on to that set.
Yeah, I almost think, I mean, because they put a ton, that was a totally new set. They've said that. And they put a lot of money into that.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think that's getting torn down.
No. I like I said, to make that an elaborate of a set for just 2 episodes.
Right.
Yeah.
I did, just another negative quick. I did feel like it was a missed opportunity to not, like, for a second there, when Enterprise is getting repaired at the very end of the episode of part 2, I would have put the straight warp pylons on there, because it has the curved ones.
I almost thought they were going to do that,
For a second, it looked like they did, but at the end of the
episode, when they were, repairing the ship after they blew that chunk out of it, I almost thought that they were going to have the straight pylons, but they didn't do that. But yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, it would have been great if they did, but whatever. I'm sure there'll be another opportunity to do that if they want to. I think there was a lot of things where they were expecting with this season, they were expecting for the Viacom CBS deal to close to where CBS would have complete control over Star Trek.
Right.
And then they wouldn't have to worry about perhaps that 25% rule, which I'm still a little worried about, though. In the future, you and I, Rob, are going to talk more about that, but that's for another episode.
Right.
So anyway, yeah, I thought the Enterprise bridge, again, looked fantastic. I was very pleased with it. It had enough of the original series to feel right.
Well, not just the original series, but they're all the little hints from the pilot episode.
Yes.
Like the little, I don't know what it is, viewfinder, that's at number one station.
Yep.
And the one that Spock has as his science terminal, that was in the original series too. But he even had graphics on his terminal that were from the original series, which I thought was great nods.
Yeah, even the cinematography at that point, especially at the very end of part 2.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. Yeah,
yeah,
it's very much
like
a nod to the beginning of Cage, where they zoom in, but instead they're zooming out.
Right from the top of the bridge.
Right.
I thought that was great. That was a very nice touch. So really I'll give them that. Yeah. Now, what did you think of Ethan Peck? Because we get him shaving and cutting his hair at the end, and he comes out in the blue uniform, and he looks like, or he's trying to look like, the Spock that we quote unquote know and love from the original series. How did you feel about that?
I mean, I just have a nitpick, and that the sideburns looked way too long and not pointy enough. And,
right.
It kind of threw me off a little, but I mean, I think the haircut and he does a passable Spock, unshaven.
Yeah. I thought it looked pretty good. Like that was it's like, okay, if we were doing a Pike show, that would work.
Yeah, but for some reason they made his sideburns just like really long.
Yeah,
it didn't look right.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. So those are my like 2 major questions: is what do we think of the bridge, and what do we think of Spock? Both of which I guess I'd say were pluses in the end, right? Yeah. So Rob, I mean, give me another positive or whatever it is. It can be a negative or a mixture too.
Well, what did you think about the final conversation between Spock and Burnham?
So I'm trying to think of it. I mean, like I get the gist.
Well, she gives him a piece of parting advice, and
yeah, it's where she's kind of talking about Kirk. It seems pretty clear.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it was fine, and I got it. Like, I mean, I guess the writing was pretty good because you knew they were talking about Kirk, right? Even though they definitely did not explicitly say it. But trying to find somebody that's very different from you, embrace that. I don't think that was needed. I don't think that part of me feels like that kind of cheapens the Kirk-Spock relationship, which is one of the greatest relationships in entertainment history. I don't know. I didn't feel like it was necessary, and I overall have a problem with the faux emotional, I'll just say bullshit that Discovery has been especially putting out in season 2. But go ahead. What did you think?
That's how I felt like the conversation started out for me, where basically, they're both like, Burnham's like, oh, I just got you back. And, and Spock was, like, you never lost me. And like that to me, just kind of like that missed completely.
Right.
And that kind of, to me, that diminished that line that came afterwards, where she's like, find the person that's farthest from you and let them guide you. I actually liked that line. I appreciated that. I thought that was actually kind of, I mean, and I get what you're saying, but to me, like I know what they were talking probably about Kirk, but I do think that's kind of like a positive, like good message to put out there. But at the same time, like I said, the entire conversation that took place before that, that's what cheapened it for me.
Yeah, I can hear that. I mean, again, I'll give credit to the writers for, like, because when she was saying it, I knew they meant Kirk, and like that's pretty good if you can just allude to that. Like, that's nice work. But yeah, I agree with you that all that it just didn't fly with me.
Yeah, it was a total miss. I understand that they had to get that conversation started somehow, but like Spock acting, that forlorn and lost, like it didn't sit well with me.
Yeah, I mean, it does speak to all these goodbyes in these 2 fucking episodes. Like the title is apropos. Such sweet sorrow. Parting is such sweet sorrow. Like, because everybody's just parting. I mean, Cornwell dying, and there's a goodbye there. I mean, I don't know what the count is for goodbyes in these 2 episodes.
There's definitely a lot of sorrow. I don't know how sweet it is.
Yeah, right. Well, no, I mean, the episodes were not sweet at all, in my opinion. Yeah. Man.
You're kind of burnt out it by that point, aren't you?
Oh, this season burned me out. Like if I watch this, like all at once, if I binge watch this, like I wouldn't have any breath left.
Right. It's kind of like the opposite of season 1, where you kind of had to binge watch it to really get it. This season, binge watch it, man, you're just going to be like, this is the show to slit your wrist to.
Yeah, which is so not Star Trek.
Right.
Like even Deep Space Nine. I know Deep Space Nine was critical of the future, but at the same time, it wasn't critical of humanity. It was very pro, what humanity can do,
right?
And how we can work together with people that are very different from us, like Derek. And
really dark shit where like they completely decimate Cardassia, but at the end of that, there's sort of like, you have the extremely cynical character of Garrick, and you actually get a sense of hope from him.
Yeah. And the message of hope that they kind of tried, or the hopeful cry that they keep trying to put out through this season, is like, we're Starfleet. You keep getting that over and over again. And you got that somewhat in season 1. In Pike, go ahead.
Which I brought up last time, and I kind of mentioned that it was kind of condescending, and I kind of wanted, I thought more about why I said that, and I wanted to clarify it actually.
Sure.
Like a thing that has been, and I don't expect everybody to understand this, but a thing that's been on my mind quite a bit lately is kind of stuff that's been going on in the gaming industry with the company BioWare. Mm-hmm. And a thing that gets repeated a lot that's come out is like, they have this internal attitude of, well, we're BioWare and we have BioWare magic. And they use that to exploit people. And I kind of like, I'm very wary of that kind of attitude, and that's the kind of sense that I get when I hear stuff like we're Starfleet.
Yeah, and Deep Space Nine, bringing up Deep Space Nine throughout this episode has been really helpful, because I mean, some would argue that that's like the best Star Trek ever done, and I don't blame them for thinking. Yeah. I mean, would you actually agree with that? Would you say DS9 is your favorite?
It's kind of a tie between Next Gen and DS9. I love them both equally, but for different reasons.
Yeah.
But like I'm not going to argue with anybody who says that DS9 is the best of Trek.
Yeah. So one of my favorite episodes of Star Trek overall, and definitely one of my favorite episodes of Deep Space Nine, and you can listen back to episodes of Sovryn Trek, where we do breakdowns of like top 8s of our, or top 3s of our favorite episodes and everything. Is an episode called Paradise in season 2. And in that, there is a point, I love this. It's what makes the episode for me. It's this episode where they land on, O'Brien and Sisko land on this planet where technology doesn't work. And there's almost like this like rewilding cult there. And I'm not meaning to insult rewilding. I think that's a totally valid thing. But for whatever reason, Sisko has to get put into this box. He's getting punished. And the head of the colony says, look, you don't have to go back into this box as long as you take off your Starfleet uniform. Just take off the uniform. And that's all she says. And Sisko doesn't reply shit. He just hops back into the box. Okay. Or then the other time, like he just falls to his knees because he's sweating to death in this box or whatever, like heat exhaust, whatever terrible situation's happening. And he just won't take that damn uniform off. He never says a word though. And I love that. Because, I mean, that is like, no, I'm a fucking Starfleet officer. You're not going to get me to take off my uniform. But you don't have to say it. And that's great goddamn writing. And that's the problem that I have, is that go ahead.
It was very much a Cool Hand Luke sort of moment.
Oh, nice. Yes, you're totally right about that. And, for Pike and Saru and fucking Burnham and everybody to have to constantly say, we're Starfleet. Everybody knows you're Starfleet. You don't have to tell us that, you just show it. And you just, your actions do the talking like it did with Sisko in Paradise. And man, that pissed me off. And I think that's what's rubbing me. Go ahead.
Like I said last time, is, Starfleet isn't great because of the organization. Starfleet's great because of the people in it.
Yes.
Not the other way around, which is what they're trying to, convey in Discovery, which is bullshit.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. So that also appeared in these episodes, and even Pike. It's the one thing that I didn't like that Pike would say. It just got fucking annoying as hell. And that ran throughout the entire season. But anyway, I'm trying to think of other negatives here that I felt with this episode. I mean, I could say one of the positives, going back to the battle sequences, it was nice to see the blue phasers in stream as well. You know, it wasn't the Kelvin timeline kind of phasers where they're bursts.
Right.
It was nice to see the D7s had the right color that they were launching out, you know, green blasts and everything. All that was great. You know, having a lot of those nods, that's part of why I was thinking that maybe go ahead.
Even before that, you know, they had the original photon torpedo sound. I thought that was a really cool nod. I enjoyed that a lot.
No, I agree with you. There's a lot of great sounds in the background, which sadly, because the show is on a streaming service, you can't fucking hear it half the time. Like there is like when you watch, I talked about this when I did a review of the Blu-rays of season 1 of Discovery. There is so much going on sound wise, and a lot of it is cues to other Star Trek. And it's a shame that you can't always hear it because of the streaming service, because they fuck with the audio first and foremost to try and get great video out there. So I'm sure we're going to hear a lot more of that when the Blu-rays for this come out, which I will still buy, by the way, even though as much as I'm complaining about the show, I still love Star Trek, and I'm still going to be, you know, on top of all that. But I thought that was, a lot of that original series cues visually and sound-wise.
Yeah, there's audio and visual cues from all throughout Star Trek. In fact, I think I even remember hearing some like next gen computer sounds and like plenty. The red alert symbols on the corner of view screen are the red alert symbols that they used during Wrath of Khan and those motion pictures. And all that kind of little stuff is cool. I appreciate all that.
Yeah, internally, as far as internal consistency, I did like that they used those spinner ships that were in the first in the episode Brothers of season 2 that seemed to come out of nowhere, which I complained about.
Right.
Now I don't feel so bad about them. It's like, okay, well, they used them again as like a little warship to take on Section 31. So that worked for me. Like, I thought that was a nice touch. A negative that I will bring up, Ash Tyler is now the head of Section 31. What has he been with that organization for? 4 months? 5? Like the most important and advanced organization in Starfleet, and in the Federation, and you're handing it over to this guy?
Yeah, the other thing too is sort of like this character is like a failure in so many ways. But I mean, like just like not even like, you know, like in meta sense of the way they wrote the character. No, like the actual character in life is kind of a loser. And and the fact that he takes over Section 31, and like you kind of get the sense that like they expect him to like shape things up and make it more like moral or ethical or transparent or something like that. And obviously by the time we get to, you know, Deep Space Nine, he's totally failed at that goal. So he's a loser again. So it's kind of, you know, it's kind of appropriate that they gave him the job, considering where Section 31 ends up in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh man, I can't stand this character. Like, I was really hoping he was going to be one of the ones that would end up getting offed. You know, to create like a sad moment between him and Pike, because they were trying to build up a Pike and Tyler friendship, it seemed like.
Right. Or even between him and Burnham. Like, I think, you know, that would have given Burnham, like, you know, a little bit more emotional impetus to like do what she had to do.
Yeah, and you get none of that. And that was a missed opportunity, in my opinion, to take a shitty character and at least give it some meaning, but they didn't do it. I was very disappointed in that. And again, there's no logistical sense in handing over Section 31 to that guy. That doesn't make sense at all.
You know, it would have been great if during the episode Daedalus Project, they had replaced Arium with him.
Oh,
that would have made way more sense.
Yeah.
And then you could still have this character of Arium and develop her the way that she should have been.
Yeah, no, I agree. Again, missed opportunities, you know.
Right.
Fuck. Yeah, so, you know, I want to kind of, I guess maybe, do you have any other big comments you want to bring up about these 2 episodes?
I'm not really think like there's, like you said at the beginning, Brian, there's really not a lot that happens in these 2 episodes.
It's just action.
Yeah. I mean, they're really shallow.
Yeah, they are
There's
very
really
shallow.
Not a whole we're kind of like getting into the nitty gritty sort of details here. So
Yeah.
we've kind of covered a lot of it, of what little there is.
Yeah, so I agree with you there that, I mean, I'm sure there's a million other things that I can remember where I was like last night, understand when I was watching this, I watched it, as it came out, because I'm like, you show me this game-changing episode, Alex Kurtzman, which I don't trust that guy right now. But
no.
I trust him about as much as I trust J.J. Abrams.
I was just going to say that.
And I don't fucking trust J.J. Abrams. Which folks,
he'll mirror bar out in the future.
Yeah, exactly, folks. Listen to TIE Fighter Renegades for April. You are in for a treat this month, I guarantee you. So anyway, yeah, so I was like, okay, here's going to be this game changer. He's going to set everything right. That's exactly what he said they were going to do. And I'm watching it, and I'm like, you didn't do any of that. Of course, we talked about it at the top of the show, but there was points where I was like yelling at the screen. I'm like, that is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Like I was saying that. And I don't think I've ever yelled that at Star Trek. And I don't think it's because I'm like older and more cynical or something. There's problems here. So I want to get into an overview of season 2, and I'm going to lay out something here at the beginning and ask you what you think about this, Rob.
Sure.
Which is, now literally we know that the first 6 episodes of this 14 episode season was under different management. Okay, it was under Gretchen Berg and Aaron Harberts, and then after that, it fell under Alex Kurtzman, and particularly they brought in the writer Michelle Paradise, which they claim she's great. She was one of the people credited with this 2-parter episode that had all kinds of pacing problems and everything else that Discovery's had forever. I don't know that that's any I wouldn't put that on your resume. Okay. So we know that there was there was actually a management shift, a critical management shift in the middle of the season. We kind of talked about this in the last Sovryn Trek, but bottom line, I feel like the answers that we got at the end of this episode, at the end of this season, were absolutely not even remotely close to what was originally planned at the beginning of this season. There were so many threads that were never picked up, never touched on further throughout that started off in the first half of the season and just never got dropped or never got talked about or picked up at the end of the second.
Right.
Go ahead.
Even the tone and the themes of the show changed drastically. Yes. Yeah, I agree with you 100% on that. And like I said earlier, these last 2 episodes very much felt like something that was written by somebody who felt like they were painted into a corner and had to, answer everything and came up short.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know what was going on. If they had a plan from the beginning and they decided to change things, or maybe those original writers never disclosed those plans if they had them.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, obviously a lot of things changed, and obviously not quite for the better,
Yeah. I mean,
because all the things that were good about this show, the acting and the performances and that stuff, that would have still been part of the show no matter who you had writing.
Right. Yeah. So I felt I was excited at the beginning of this season. I was like, wow, these the first 3 or 4 episodes. I was like, oh, this is good. We're fixing things. We're going to make this work. And then it's it all just fell apart. I thought they were going to talk about some real Star Trek subjects, we're going to talk about God versus science. We're going to talk about all these other things.
Yeah,
all that
life
gone.
And death, and
yeah, and it's just gone. It never came up again. And I am pro Aaron Harberts and Gretchen Berg getting sent home. I really am. I heard some of the ugly shit.
They were acting like shitbags.
Yeah, they were, and I just never had. When I used to watch them on After Trek, I just had this horrible feeling about Aaron Harberts. Something wasn't right about this guy. He just seemed sleazy, and I didn't like him writing my Star Trek or being in charge.
I couldn't watch that show at all. I tried watching the first After Trek, and it was just I couldn't stand it.
No, I know.
To be honest with you, it was terrible.
It is so annoying. So season 2 runs into that problem where it is clearly it's almost like two different shows were written here. And that's a really bad problem. That doesn't mean, now, like you said, and you've brought up many times, like Captain Pike, fucking awesome. A lot of the acting, some of these characters were just incredible, like really, really well done.
And all the attention to detail with the sets and stuff like that, and the stuff we talked about just recently here, that would have all persisted throughout the show, no matter who was writing it. Because obviously, like, the people working behind the scenes, they obviously love Star Trek. And that's the thing that I've totally been on board with this season is, like, everybody not in the writing room loves Star Trek.
Right. Yeah. But for whatever reason, because there's some great writers there. Kirsten Byers is a great writer. I love her Voyager novels. I mean, she's tremendous. She's doing a good job with the comic books, or at least a passable job, if not, very good. I don't understand how the writing fails so hard. And one of the big problems also that comes from the writing is most of the jokes don't land. Most of the humor in this season, I didn't feel like real. I mean, there's a couple moments, and most of them have to do with Michelle Yeoh. I didn't think that they really hit. And I feel like, and we talked about this in the last episode of Sovryn Trek, I feel like a lot of this was just written kind of for, I mean, look, I'm a millennial, but it feels like it was written for millennials. And it feels like it was written to attract the person today and to make the person today, like the human of the 21st century, feel good about themselves. As to where I feel like Star Trek before, especially with the Next Generation and even Deep Space Nine and so on, was about showing you how we can be, that we can be, and even Enterprise did this. There's plenty of points where I can think of some epic fucking quotes from Captain Archer. And that was before Discovery. That was in the 22nd century.
Right.
Where it was about, this is what we can become, or this is what we have become. And they didn't bother to appeal to the modern day problems and dare I say prejudices and so on. I know Star Trek has commentated on those sorts of things, but I don't know, like the message of this is what we can become just seemed completely lost on Discovery, except for maybe with Pike. And that I just walk away totally disappointed with this show.
I agree with you. And in addition to that, this show also seems to be written for an audience with a shorter attention span.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, because you get in critical thinking for a second and none of this stuff makes sense.
Yeah. So, I mean, this like, oddly enough, comes all back to stuff that, you talk about on Sovryn Tech all the time. It's kind of like this is a reflection of, a distracted, populace.
Yeah.
And that's the way that this show definitely feels, is distracted and unfocused and, like I said, short attention spans.
Yeah. It's pretty sad. I will reserve judgment until we get some other shows like the Picard show. Boy, if they fuck that up, they're in trouble.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that gives me a little confidence there is that Patrick Stewart apparently has quite a bit of creative control in that show, so I don't think it's going to be total shit. I mean, Alex Kurtzman is involved, but like he seems to be the new Rick Berman.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he very much is. But hopefully, I don't know. Yeah, so, well, you raised a great point that this is Star Trek for the YouTube generation, pretty much. And Star Trek's not that. Like, that's not its style. I feel like Star Trek really is meant to show us a lot more, and its appeal comes from the fact that, again, it shows us what we can be, that things can be better, that the future doesn't have to be just a dystopian version of how it is now. And I feel like that's all they've been showing over and over again.
And sadly, it sounds like we're going to continue to get that because we're going 900 years into the future and being told that there's even worse things.
Yeah, so I want to talk about,
we see in Calypso, it sounds like, like humanity is at war with itself.
And went backwards. Yeah, like everything went backwards. And so, yeah, you're right. That's totally right. I think it's going to continue on that depressing message. And I mean, that leads to another, we didn't even get into the problems with Control. I think that they wasted that storyline. because it went too quick. If you read the David Mack book Control, that could have been really, really well done.
Right.
Very interesting.
And they and when it took over, and I can't even remember his name from Section 31, Leland, they embodied in a character that was just so uninteresting and boring. Yep. And not just the character, but the actor was just boring to watch. He was probably the worst actor on that whole show this season.
Yeah. I mean, and so they dropped the ball with Control, and that runs into another logistical issue where, like, okay, you're telling me that, like, Daniels from the 29th century or whatever wouldn't come back and put a fucking stop to that, just like he stopped the Suliban. Control seemed far worse than the Suliban in the Enterprise. God, none of that shit makes any sense. Anyway, so we're in the 33rd century now. We know that's where we're going to end up with season 3. Kurtzman has come out. He talked to the Hollywood Reporter, said we are jumping 950 years into the future for season 3. I want to read his quote to segue into this, and then I have another quick topic that I want to get into with you, Rob. But let's read this quote here from Kurtzman, saying about how the going into the 33rd century is going to free the show up. He says, "We love playing within canon. It's a delight and a privilege. It's fun to explore nooks and crannies of the universe that people haven't fully explored yet. That being said, we felt strongly that we wanted to give ourselves an entirely new energy for season 3 with a whole new set of problems. We're farther than any Trek show has ever gone. I also had experience working on the J.J. Abrams films where we were stuck with canonical problems. We knew how Kirk had died. We wondered how we could put him in jeopardy to make it feel real. That's what led us to go with an alternate timeline. Suddenly we could tell the story in a very unpredictable way. That's the same thought process that went into jumping 950 years into the future. We're now completely free of canon, and we have a whole new universe to explore." And he says there will be canonical references to everything that has happened in the various shows. We're not erasing that, but we're so far past that point that all of that is a very distant memory. We're very excited to see how the elements of Star Trek, play in an entirely new universe. So how do you feel about that direction? How do you feel about Kurtzman's comments?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it doesn't really seem like they're going to be, correcting course with any of the stuff that they're saying. And I'll make a prediction, like a very solid prediction about what's going to happen next season, that kind of ties in with what we see in Calypso, and kind of it seems like the episode New Eden was very much created to set up the next season. I think that, like I said, you have the Vidarish, which they've already confirmed is the Federation.
Right. He
said, that's just a bastardization of the name Federation.
Right.
Versus, whatever,
Kraft was.
Kraft was. Just, I think Kraft is probably from New Eden. So like that's going to be basically the two, that's the point where humanity diverged, and that's going to be the two factions in 950 years from now. Sure.
Right. Now there was an animated show that I think was actually called Final Frontier. I think that might have been the name of it, that they were originally going to make about 10 years ago. And it was going to be like a web series, but it dealt with where it played up on the fact that warp drive was like fucking with space.
Right.
And so the Federation like split up because nobody could get to other planets in a fast enough time, like because they couldn't use warp drive anymore. And there was going to be like an Enterprise, I don't know, H or some crazy letter. And it kind of sounds like maybe they're trying to run with that, which I'm not opposed to that idea. The problem is what you brought up beautifully is that it's just going to be more of this fucking darkness and depressing Star Trek. There's not going to be any of that real, the beauty that Star Trek can put on display. And I don't feel much better. I don't think the Picard series is going to bring any real beauty in. It sounds like it's, dealing with the ramifications of Romulus exploding and all of this, right?
Right.
Yeah. So, I don't know. And again, we don't trust Kurtzman at all, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, I get that he's free of canon, but I don't know that I want him to be.
Right.
I
we want to get off this depression fest.
Yeah. And I don't like the idea, we have to deal with worse things. How about we stop dealing with enemies and we start exploring again,
Something that is hopeful, and which a lot of people, was something that I brought up, last time, and apparently I'm not the only one, is that people really do want to see more of Pike, because they did feel that he was like the hopeful and like truly heroic element of this season. And that he should get his own show. And there's a petition online apparently, and even Anson Mount has taken notice of it, and said that he would be he's grateful to the fans, being that invested in the character and his performance, which I think is really cool.
No, I agree. Actually, there's a couple of interesting quotes around all of that. Kurtzman has heard that, or has come out and said he hears the fans that they want a Pike show. I want a Pike show. I assume you want a Pike show, Rob.
Obviously.
Yeah,
otherwise
absolutely.
I wouldn't have brought it up the last time.
Yeah. No, that is a positive. And I mean, the way they ended season 2, it was almost like we're going to get some continuing voyages here, you know, with the Enterprise, and with Pike. I would be totally on board with that. I would love it if they did it. Kurtzman says he hears it, so maybe that's something they're going to do. I know that Anson Mount has said that there would be he says there's room for it. He says it's not an easy show to shoot because there's it takes a really long time to put together, like 14 episodes apparently.
Right.
The one interesting quote that he made about this in response, and he was like, I mean, basically he was saying he was crying, that the fans wanted it that much. He said he's never encountered this before, but he did say it would involve a lot of creative conversations. That's kind of the big quote that I got out of Anson Mount and what he said. And honestly, I think he's saying, yeah, you're not going to have the writers for Discovery writing me anymore. Like, I really feel like that's what was going on.
Yeah.
Well,
we certainly hope that's the case, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. Fuck yeah. Right. So yeah, a Pike show, I think that's very possible. Like we said earlier, they probably didn't take down that Enterprise set. There's no need to.
Yeah. And they could go either way with that. They could do a Pike show post-Discovery, or they could do a Pike show pre-Discovery. I mean, either way, there's plenty of time there to explore.
Yeah. Which would you prefer?
I'd almost prefer the pre-Discovery Pike, because at the when he comes into Discovery, he's completed a 5-year mission.
Yeah, right.
Whereas after Discovery, he's only got a few 2 or 3 years left before we hit the original series timeline. In which case, he's already been crippled.
Yeah. And
I'm not sure that I really want to end the show that way.
Yeah, and see that. I'll tell you something that I think needs to happen. I think in season 3 of Discovery, if there's any point where something needs to be saved, it would be nice to have Pike come back from like Talos 4 and give him a little bit of a sweeter send-off, than just him like knowing. I mean, we know he's on Talos 4 with Vina,
right, because
of the menagerie. But I wouldn't mind if they brought him back in the future to do something.
Right. And that episode they have on Talos 4 was one of the stronger episodes of this season. So yeah, I don't have a problem with that. Yeah, so yeah, that could work definitely.
Yeah. So a return to Talos 4 would be awesome. I'd be down with that, and bringing Pike back for a little bit. But yeah, I think so. We're getting a book. I think it comes out in June. I have it pre-ordered. It's The Enterprise War, which is going to deal with Pike pre-Discovery, but just pre-Discovery. Like pre-season 2, but post-season 1, I think. And I'll be curious, depending upon what happens in that book, whether or not there's going to be any lead up to they're going to do a Pike show and when that's going to take place. But I agree they could do either, because you can make Anson Mount look younger. Rebecca Romaine can look, fairly younger. I don't see any reason not to.
I don't even think they have to do that much, because like I said, it was just 5 years previous. I mean, that's not much time.
No, right. They could look as they are.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with you. I wouldn't mind post, just because I would think a beautiful ending for a show like that would be to hand off the Enterprise to Kirk. You could still do that, I guess, in a finale where it takes place years later or something, I suppose. But I wouldn't mind seeing that moment. It wasn't
Prime Directive. That would be kind of cool, where like if they have the handing off the Enterprise to Captain Kirk, and then they continue with that just a little bit further, and like you said, they go back to Talos 4 at some point, and they have kind of like a happier ending for Pike than they even had in The Cage. And yeah, I could definitely see that working.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I would take a season 4 and 5 of the original series if they wanted to get really ballsy and do like what Star Trek Continues did, and like lead right up to that. Because one of my favorite books, Star Trek books, is Vonda McIntyre's Enterprise, which is about the first adventure of the Enterprise under Captain Kirk, and you get the handoff in that and everything. It is all like I was just endlessly fascinated by whatever that book had to say. So I would love for a Pike show to get to that point somehow, pre or post Discovery, whatever. That would be cool. But I would love it if they give us a Kirk, and then that Kirk, we pick up right after Turnabout Intruder of season 3, and just give me season 4 and 5 and lead right into the motion picture.
Yeah, the original series never really got a proper send-off.
No, it didn't. It's a criminal.
The last episode of the original series was terrible.
Yeah, in fact, I wish that never got made. It's like the one episode of Star Trek that I wish never happened, because it's put down that rule that women can't be starship captains.
Right.
The dumbest shit in the world.
Yeah.
For such a progressive show to end off with that,
right.
that needs to be corrected.
And obviously they're showing willingness to kind of correct some of this, because I mean, like, even in the Cage originally, you had Pike saying stuff like, I'm not used to having women on the bridge, and obviously that's not been the case with this version of Pike.
Right. I mean, you have an admiral. You have a woman admiral there, and we've seen,
and he relies on number one a lot.
Exactly.
She's just kind of like, she's pretty much running the shit most of the time.
Yeah, and that's another thing. I'd love for her character to get explored. There have been a few different ideas for her character. I think her character name is Una, and then kind of the last name changes depending upon which book you're reading. Technically, Drastic Measures or Despot Hours, whatever the first Discovery book was, had Pike in it and had number one, and they give her a name, and she has this really cool relationship with Saru. I mean, it was funny in the Sweet Sorrow two-parter where like the Starfleet admiral's asking her name, and she says number one. That worked.
Even when she's getting debriefed by Starfleet at the end of the episode, it was number one.
Number one. Yeah. Now in some of Peter David's books, actually, I think it was in the New Frontier books, which are awesome Star Trek books. You find out that number one is actually an immortal, like Flint from Requiem for Methuselah, the original series episode. And if they wanted to play that up, do it. Like, I think that would be so cool, because it was a way of explaining why the fuck is she so brilliant, and seems so kind of ahead of the game as far as humans go and everything. And I wouldn't mind if they went with that. I'd like to see some of these. I mean, they're already borrowing from the books, like with Control and some other stuff. Borrow that, because that was an awesome idea on Peter David's part, to have that character be, she's not just a woman on the bridge. She's a fucking immortal that, could probably wipe the floor with anybody around her.
Yeah, Peter David had a lot of great Star Trek books. Remember, like he did one of the best Borg books ever with Vendetta.
Oh yeah. Oh my God. I totally forgot about that one. That was dynamite. Yes. Well said. So yeah, there's a lot to pull from. And I know actually I've heard Robert Meyer Burnett, who did Free Enterprise, the geek movie. I say that kindly, the nerd movie. Robert Meyer Burnett, who loves Star Trek, he's actually been on railing for this for a while, where just borrow from the books, borrow from the comics. There's great ideas out there, put them in. And it does appear they may be starting to do that. They did that with this, like the Ship of the Dead in season 1 of Discovery was from a book from the 70s. So there's no reason not to keep going with that. And I think there's some really great ideas that they could run with. And anyway, we've talked about a few.
Well, this idea has been floating around, because I don't remember if it was IO9 or somebody else, but somebody put out an article just a few weeks ago about, here's all these great Star Trek novels from the past that, would make great Star Trek movies, let alone episodes. So I mean, there's just, there is truly a wealth of material out there. I mean, like
decades worth.
Yeah, literally decades worth, and just literally hundreds of novels.
Yeah, great stuff to run with. So we'll see. I mean, I'm not feeling very good about Star Trek right now, which I can't believe I'm saying that. It's a very different attitude that I had at the beginning of season 2.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah, and I don't trust Kurtzman. His best thing he can do is just be quiet. Like, he just needs to not
But I
respond.
mean, like I didn't completely trust Braga or not. What's his name, Berman. Back in the,
yeah,
I didn't completely trust him back in the day. Yet we still managed to get some great Trek out of it. So I mean,
right.
Hopefully he can step more into like just a managerial role and not micromanage it so far as the writing goes, and not be involved in that part of it.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I think that like the Mandalorian and what Disney Plus is doing with Star Wars and a lot of that is going to be a swift kick to the pants for Star Trek and for CBS.
Yeah,
they're going to have to pick it up because
it's interesting because I remember we talked before about we mentioned an article where they were saying they basically canceled. The explanation was that they canceled Star Trek 4 of the new Star Trek movies was because of Star Wars.
Right.
Well, as we're going to talk about in TIE Fighter Renegades, apparently Star Wars movies are going on a hiatus after Episode 9. This is the perfect opportunity for Paramount to get its shit together.
Yeah, and depending upon how long that break is going to be, that's a great point. We'll talk about that more in TIE Fighter Renegades, but depending upon how big that break is going to be, it's time to get Tarantino's ass in gear, because he was supposed to be one of the people making a Star Trek movie.
Right, but I think even like Tarantino was like talking about he wanted to do something with the Picard character, but now he has his own show. So
right.
I don't like Tarantino is going to have to apparently probably change his plans.
Yeah. Oh fuck. I don't know, but that's a great point for you to bring up, and you're right. They should totally jump on that, or let Nick Meyer make that trilogy that he wanted to make.
Oh yeah,
they were talking with him, and they said, yeah, make a trilogy, and he talks about what he can with it, but do that. Oh, right. Yeah. I mean, if Star Wars is going to be out of theaters for a little while, I mean, granted, the Star Wars being out of theaters, I think a lot of that has to do with solidifying Avatar. Because Disney is kind of branding Avatar now, James Cameron's World of Pandora there. So there could be some of that, but still, then fine, take on Pandora. At the very least, you're not taking on Star Wars. So yeah, that's a great point for you to bring up.
Either one of these franchises could kick James Cameron's ass any day.
Yes, I agree. Totally. Agree.
And don't get me wrong, I love James Cameron. I loved Aliens. I loved Terminator.
Yep.
The great movies, but they're not Star Trek. They're not Star Wars.
Yeah, no. And I think even James Cameron knows that. And like you can even hear interviews with him when he interviews the people that makes, like when he interviewed George Lucas and a lot of this other stuff, he knows shit that's better than mine. Right. In fact, I remember one interview he was talking about when they were talking about Star Wars, and like they were talking about how the universe is dirty and everything looks old in Star Wars and all that. And they go to a clip of him and James Cameron just like, just shaking his head. He's like, fuck, someone got there first, so he knows, just how great it is. Yeah. It's time. Star Trek can step up. You're totally right. That's a great point. So I don't know if there's a hopeful message here, there's the one, and maybe we'll get that Pike show, which I think would be a total win.
Yeah. Because, like you said, like Pike bringing up the comment about, needing to make some, creative, allowances or decisions, given the position that the fans are putting him and that potential show in, he has the leverage to have some creative control over that show. And I think he should push for that.
Yeah. I think he's the modern day Shatner, where Shatner had all that stroke at the time. And he even if he wasn't directing or whatever he was doing, he could say, I don't want to do that on the bridge. And the director just said, okay, fine.
Right. Right. Because no shade to Hunter, but like Anson Mount has pretty much taken over that character for me.
Yep, I agree. I think of him first now. Yeah. No, that's fair to say. Yeah. Yeah, they'd be fools not to run on this. Because I mean, great actor, great character, and it's about what's that?
Got the sets.
Yeah, you already have the sets all set. Just all right. We can wrap this up. But one last negative, and this is that whole thing about how there's clearly two different writing, or it feels like two very different writing teams in season 2 of Discovery. One of the most hopeful things that I got was from the episode Brothers when Pike takes over the Discovery. He's talking to Burnham, and he says, while we're doing this, let's make sure we have some fun, ruffle a few feathers. Yeah. Where the fuck was the fun? There's no fun. Everything was depressing.
No. Yeah.
So hopefully we can get that show where Pike gets to have some goddamn fun.
Right.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah,
man. Anyway.
yeah. Just I mean, I think that's kind of like people get a lot of, like the vibe of classic Trek from Mount's performance of Pike.
Yes.
And that's really what they want.
Yeah.
Give us just the feeling and the vibe of classic Trek that this character embodies and that the actor is obviously putting on screen. Give us that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we can wrap that up with that message, because that's really what we want out of this. Season 3, I know they're going to start shooting in July, so we can expect it probably around the same time as Season 2 of Discovery came out. I would expect maybe early 2020, maybe a little later. But, they got to be careful with the Picard show. So anyway, we'll see what ends up happening there. But Rob, as always, man, the absolute pleasure of discussing Star Trek. Well, anyway, with the thousands and thousands of listeners here on Zomia ONE. So thanks for being on, man. And we'll rejoin for TIE Fighter Renegades, and we got all kinds of shit to talk about there. So thanks for being on, man.
Hell yeah.
Woo.